Hi, and welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My name is Lisa Curcio. My card today is a fun fold, and I'm using a holiday catalog stamp set called #Elfie. I know, kind of unusual, but so is this fold, and it's quite easy. I'm going to walk you through the process and give you lots of tips along the way. If this is your first time visiting my YouTube channel, I would love to have you subscribe. Click that subscribe button down below and make sure you click that small bell icon that's next to it. That will give you notifications of when I'm live here on YouTube as well as when I upload a new video. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's project. I didn't show you the card in the introduction because I did not think you could actually appreciate it. So when I said it pops down, I wasn't kidding. So it slides right down to the bottom of the base of the card and that pops up your image. Isn't this adorable? Very simple to put together. I'm going to walk you through the steps. I'm beginning with a piece of old olive cardstock. This measures 4 1/4 by 10, and we're going to do some scoring. My trimmer actually has a scoring blade on it, so that's what I'm going to be using. Otherwise, you can use a scoring tool. If you don't have the scoring blade on your trimmer, let me give you a tip. You can actually score right in between the clear cutting guide on your own trimmer. All the score lines are actually 1 1/4 inches apart. To make it easier for you, I'm going to walk you through it. So I'm going to measure the first one at 1 1/4 inch, and I'm going to score. I'm moving over to 2 1/2 inches, and I'll score. Then 3 3/4, 5, 6 1/4, 7 1/2, and the last one is at 8 3/4. I'm going to fold this in half. That's the 5-inch score line. I did that so that you can actually see where I'm going to create a slit for the pop down on this card. We are going to cut a slit down in the center of this cardstock, wide enough for the pop-up. Now I've got my cardstock lined up here at the 5-inch mark, and I can see that my score line falls right down the center of my cutting track. If you are not comfortable doing this with your trimmer, you can use a ruler and an X-Acto blade or a straight knife if that works better for you. But we're going to leave about 5/8 of an inch on either side of this. Now, since my cutting track actually has a cutting blade on it and it also has a little pointer right here, I'm going to line this up at the 5/8 inch mark. I'll bring my blade down, and then I'll slide down to the 3 5/8 inch mark, which will leave me 5/8 of an inch on this side. Hold the paper in place and lift up the guide, and you should be able to see that you have approximately equal space on both sides here. Here's the slit in the center of our cardstock. All the cutting and scoring is finished. All we have to do now is do some assembly. So I'm going to turn this upside down, and I'm going to recommend that you use your bone folder. What you want to do is you want to come up and crease those very well. I like to align both of my edges to make sure that they're straight, and I'll come back over those and I'll reinforce those with the bone folder. Whenever you're creating a project that is going to have very distinct lines, whether it's a box or another 3D project, you want to make sure that those score lines are well enforced and creased well. I have an additional piece of old olive cardstock. This measures 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. These two outside flaps are going to eventually come down. So leaving this one folded, this piece of cardstock will end up getting adhered here at the very bottom crease. What I want to do too is I want to call your attention to the fact that you're going to want to make sure that you have ample space on either side of this so that the panel will slide up through that hole. Once you know that the slit is sufficiently wide enough, we're going to add adhesive to the bottom portion of this cardstock. I'm using tear and tape, and I do recommend that you use the same. You want a very nice strong adhesive. Even a glue is fine. This is going to be pushed up and down quite a bit because the person receiving it is going to be totally amazed at the mechanics. I've used my tear and tape here, and I've got my take your pick tool with the paper piercing tool attachment. That's going to help me remove that paper backing. We've got our adhesive here. I'm going to turn that upside down. That now is going to go here, keeping in mind that I'm looking to make sure that I've got exposure to go through that slit before I tack it down. And then I'm going to press. Eventually this flap will come down so it'll look like the one here at the bottom. Now while we have it flat is the best time to go ahead and decorate it. I have a piece of thick Whisper White cardstock that I'm going to be doing my stamping on, and I'm using this stamp set from the holiday catalog called #Elfie. You'll find this stamp set in the brand new holiday catalog. Now if you don't already have a demonstrator, and you're interested in receiving complimentary copies of one or both of these catalogs, head over to lisasstampstudio.com and click on Contact Me. I'm going to use my Memento ink since I'm going to be using alcohol-based markers to color this image in. I have it here, and because it's rather large, I'm going to leave it face up on my work surface to ink it. This will ensure that I won't miss an area where I'm applying ink. I'm going to go ahead and stamp this now over to the far left side to make sure that everything is going to fit. And I have a scrap piece here of thick Whisper White cardstock. I've pulled out the greeting from that exact same stamp set that says A Holiday Hello, and I'll ink that up as well, and I'm going to stamp that here. Also from that same stamp set, I've pulled out the words that say Just for Fun, and I'll ink those up as well, and I'm going to stamp those here near the top. I used my alcohol-based Stampin' Blends markers to color in my image. And I'm not going to color the whole thing with you. I have one already finished, but I want to talk you through the colors that I used. And I'm going to give you a very quick demonstration on how I did just a little bit of shading. I used the light Stampin' Blends first. It doesn't matter if you prefer the dark. It's just a matter of preference. I'm preferring to use the chiseled end versus the thicker end just because it's a smaller area. I'll come in here and I'll color that in. Once that color has been laid down, I'm going to come back in now with the darker shade, and I'm going to add some areas that I want some highlights in. So I'm just going to stroke on some darker color in some areas along one side, just to give this a little bit of definition. The secret to the blending is to go back to the lightest color and bring those two shades together. So I'm going to come back over this area, and I'm going to drag that darker color into the lighter shade that's to the right-hand side. Now, because the alcohol is going to need a few moments to dissipate or to evaporate, you're not going to be able to see the true tone until that happens. But you can see now that we've got beautiful shading here. Just before you joined me, I went ahead and I colored the whole thing, and I'm going to talk you through those colors. This is the ivory that I used for the flesh tone. I used the Daffodil Delight combo for areas of the ornament, the bow, the bells, the buttons here. I used the dark real red. I did no shading on this one for the brim of the hat in these areas. I used the bronze for his hair. This is also a great flesh tone. And then here at the bottom, I used the light smoky slate, and I thinned out the color with the color lifter, and I want to show you how I did that. I used the thicker end of the marker this time, and I came right up underneath the present, and then I came in with my color lifter and I went over it. What's going to happen is the alcohol begins to evaporate. That area is going to become lighter and look more like a shadow. Now that we have that image all finished, I'm going to go ahead and push that off to the side. Remember the base that we were working on for the pop down? Well, I'm going to open this up so that you can see this a little bit better. I decided to add a layer of real red cardstock. That's going to get mounted here. I do recommend, especially at the very bottom, that you use a heavier adhesive. So I'm going to place tear and tape at the bottom. The reason is we're going to have to finagle this to get this through the actual slit in the card. I'll burnish that paper down, and then with my Take Your Pick tool, I'm going to use that attachment once again, and I'll remove that paper backing. This now is going to get it adhered near the top portion. I'm leaving a border of that old olive cardstock near the top and the two sides, and then I'll press that in place. Our colored image now is going to get layered here. I want you to make sure that you use sufficient adhesive all the way around your image, and then I'll tack that down as well. Remember how this panel folded in and now this one folds in. I'm going to show you how this is going together, and we're going to make a pencil mark for the next step. So this is going to come up underneath the slit. Do you see why the tear and tape was so important? You don't want that to lift. This folded edge and this folded edge will eventually come together and be adhered. And if you can see it here, this is where the pop down is going to come into play. This panel right here, when we're all finished, is going to be the front. And just to make it easier, I put a small X there because once you open it up, the panels look very similar, and I just find that makes life a lot easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that flat. I've cut a piece of real red cardstock here. I'm going to bring in my silicone craft sheet for this because this piece is rather narrow. The silicone craft sheet is one of my very favorite tools here in the Stamp Studio because adhesive, liquid glue, and hot glue will not stick to it. It simply rubs right off. This is going to get adhered centered right inside that panel where we made the X. Remember that greeting that we stamped? Well, I decided to use the classic label punch to punch it out. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to center that the very best that I can. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to add mini dimensionals to the back side. These are pre-cut double pieces of foam tape and they fit really wonderfully on these small pieces of paper. And then I'll use my paper piercing tool attachment to help me remove those paper backings. That greeting now is going to get centered right here in the middle of that panel. I look down the center of my image and I do my best to align it. Now all we have to do now is just assemble the bottom. So remember now, this flap is going to go in to mimic this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add tear and tape adhesive here. We want a strong adhesive to hold this project in place. Now that we have the adhesive here, you're going to make sure that this flap is tucked down. And then literally all you have to do is just line up the bottoms and then close it flat. All your score lines should align perfectly. And then look at that, it's all finished. So all we have to do is push it down. Here's the one we created together today, the one I created before you joined me. Isn't this adorable? If you have enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like. It makes them and I both very happy. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you have a great day.